podcast. We're going to dive right into chapter 35. Shortly after leaving Greensward, we struck northwest off the path, which ran due north for some miles longer before splitting. One route going towards Elworth and Lockholme, and the other heading around the hills towards the Alia border. We'd have to cross it again further north near the foothills to make it back to Cavern Hall. Colin had moved up to the front with Jessie and Rye, talking quietly to them with hand gestures that were so familiar. Although my brain mostly accepted the fact I had miraculously found my brother and Bry, both of whom I had thought dead, it didn't seem fully real yet. But then again, neither did freedom, and here we were trudging through the ankle-deep snow on our way home. When Stella, Jay, Dave, and I started to fall behind after a couple hours, Colin called back that we just had to keep going a little further, that we needed to be sure we were far enough from Greensward to be safe. I made a rude gesture in response, but wasn't sure if it got lost in the darkness. All we had to see by was the stars and crescent moon, so even though it was a clear night, it wasn't very bright. Still, the four of us tried to keep up, Dave hanging off Stella's hand, head bobbing like he might have fallen asleep walking. Colin called back occasional encouragement, but other than that, the 10 of us were silent. It was near dawn when we finally stumbled into a clearing that contained an old hunting cabin. "You are a bastard," I told my brother, who looked far too proud of himself. "You knew about this place, didn't you?" "I might have, and you didn't tell us." "I wanted to make sure my big brother baiting skills were still up to the snuff," he said and grinned. "Come on, we can't risk a fire, but it'll be warmer inside. Also, if I'm a bastard, don't start with me," I told him, and shuffled past to the cabin. The place was small. It had a 2-person table and a small bed in one corner, but not a whole lot else. We all found places to sit as Jessie and Kira distributed food. Then Stella and Dave squeezed onto the bed, which would not have fit 2 adults, and the rest of us spread out around the floor. I was asleep in minutes, happily squashed between my brother and Rye. When Colin moved, sometime long after the sun had come up, I woke too, listening to him get up and slip out the door, barely making any noise. After lying there a little longer, I realized the lure to talk to him in private was too strong, and I painfully pushed myself to my feet to follow. He stood just off the front porch, looking south. Without turning around, he pointed. "Still burning." I moved to stand next to him, shielding my eyes against the brilliant late winter sun. Sure enough, after a moment, I spotted the drifting smoke coming from some miles off, heading with the wind east towards Oakbridge. I hoped they choked on it at the castle. "Jessie and Rye do nothing by halves," I said. He stuck his hands in his pockets and smiled. "Good. Let the bastards get what's coming to 'em." He glanced sidelong at me. "Got time for that story now?" "Do Mom and Dad know you're alive?" "Don't know. Presumably word reached them that Ben and his bodyguard got out, but I haven't dared try to contact them. You?" "No, they definitely think I'm dead. I couldn't risk trying to contact anyone." He nodded. "And look, my little sister, all grown up." I rolled my eyes. "If I'm all grown up, then that makes you positively ancient." He half smiled, but took it more seriously than intended. "Sometimes I feel like it." I couldn't disagree. Me too. Colin was clearly not the same person he'd been when I'd seen him last years before. Nor was I. Still, I felt easy with him, like it always had. Everyone who knew about you, about Call and Cavern Hall, was in awe. I'd been in awe. I still was. My barely older brother had become a true hero, a legend. The things he'd pulled off while we'd all been keeping quiet, some of them defied logic. Now, more than ever, I didn't think they were exaggerations. That just wasn't Colin's style. To my amusement, even though I'd been telling the truth, he blushed slightly. Before we could talk any longer, Kira stuck her head out the door. "Hey, doofus, go get some water if you're going to stand out there in the cold, will you? We're serving breakfast, or lunch, I guess, if you want some, Jez." She tossed Colin a pack with our water skins. Colin's mouth quirked into a smile as he caught it. "Whatever my lady commands," he said, pretending to doff an imaginary cap. "Shut up," Kira told him, but she grinned. It struck me that Kira, as Benton's brother, was next in line for the Northwind Dukedom, which had long been a stronghold against Alia, and one of our most powerful dukedoms. I debated helping Colin, decided I had enough of the cold and we'd spend the rest of the day hiking in it, so I headed inside, where the sheer number of bodies meant it was near stifling. It felt good. Again, we all found a perch or spot of floor to eat. Colin returned a good time with full skins of ice-cold water. For the first time since the escape, I realized just how hungry I was. When I snuck glances at Dave, Stella, and Jay, they were scarfing their food just as quickly. "Prison rations less than filling, Jasmine?" Colin asked. "Jasmine?" Rye asked, sounding confused. My brother looked just as confused. He pointed at himself. "Colin Lockholme." He pointed at me. "My sister, Jasmine Lockholme." "You're—" Rye stared at me, wide-eyed. "I'm still just Jez," I said. It's not like I was even the only incognito noble lurking around Cavern Hall. "Yeah, when Beau announced he was a High Castle, I thought we were going to lose Iris to a stroke," Jessie said. "Wait, what?" Colin interrupted now. The Walters and Bry looked just as surprised. Beau is Patrick and Elizabeth's second son, born after Elizabeth went into self-imposed exile and the rumors were spread that she died, Jessie explained. He's Rainier's younger brother. God's breath, Benton murmured, clearly trying to absorb that. We've been working for a high castle this whole time. Fancy that. I am losing my touch, Bri announced. I had no idea of that one. Anyone else have a secret identity they feel the need to share? Jay asked, looking around at us. He pinned poor Benton with a look. Are you not really a duke? Well, technically no, there's never... How have you lived with Colin this long and still rise to the bait? Kira asked him as the rest of us started laughing. Benton flushed as he glared at his sister. Colin gave him a companionable pat on the back. What's the plan? I asked more seriously. We walk back to Cavern Hall. Duh, Jay said. He was just close enough to me that I could hit him. Ow! We cleaned up our tracks when we went off the path yesterday until we were into the trees, so hopefully if there's pursuit, they won't find us, Jessie said. We should still make all due haste. Dave sighed at the prospect of more walking. I couldn't blame him. I felt stiff enough last night, but moving so far this morning had been its own type of agony. Every bruise seemed to have magnified from both the hours of trudging through snow and then lying on a hard wooden floor. We should leave as soon as we're done eating. As if that was a cue, we buckled down to finish our food, then pack up the few things we needed. Colin handed out water skins, we all shouldered our packs, and left the wonderfully warm cabin. Just so you all know, I don't know any way stations as we go further north. This isn't my usual territory. But it is ours, Jessie said. There probably aren't any others, but by the time we stop, we should be up to the foothills, and there'll be plenty of dry caves. We can spend tonight in one of them. How thrilling, Jay drawled, and got hit again, but not by me this time. Ow! He sulked at Stella. She winked at me. You're welcome, Jez. Once my muscles had loosened, I trotted to catch up with Jessie and Rye. So, how's everyone at Cavern Hall? You mean, how's Beau? Rye asked. And Mick and Duncan and Reardon, I said defensively. She just grinned. Beau's been quiet, more like he used to be before you came along. He was so certain we'd lost you and Jay. He's going to die when he sees we not only rescued you two, but found Bri and brought along the Walters and Colin the bargain. Yeah, can you believe that Bri's alive? Or that your brother has been working for us all along? Jessie asked. No, I haven't wrapped my head around Bri, let alone Colin. It doesn't seem possible when just over a week ago I thought I'd lost both of them. Miracles do happen. Speaking of miracles, I said, lowering my voice so only the two of them could hear me, what was up with Jackson McRose last night? I ran into him, literally, while we were in Greensward. Oh? Somehow that didn't surprise me. Not when Jackson seemed to be straddling an interesting line and appeared quite content in that weird place. Yeah, we talked for a bit. He told me about how he was pretty much adopted by the Oplands as a young teen and a few other things. Anyway, it was kind of strange. When he came to us with the letter for Beau from the prince, I started. Jackson told me that was him. I nodded, although he confirmed to Reese that I was who I said I was, since he was apparently at my attempted execution. He didn't tell them anything beyond exactly what he was asked. Strange man, your friend. Rice scowled. He is not my friend. And yeah, he'd mentioned he was holding back. Seems like a friend to me, Jessie said, even if he's a strange friend to have. Rye made a face at both of us. Still, as soon as she thought we weren't looking at her, her expression went decidedly thoughtful. I exchanged a wink with Jessie, then dropped back to join my brother. So, have you been based out of Greensward ever since Northwind fell? How exactly did you get on Northwind in the first place? Hello to you, too, he said dryly. I grinned at him. Come on, these are important questions. You owe me an explanation. So do you, sister dearest. You first, since I asked first. Technically, I asked first. Twice. Technically, whatever. Come on, I'm sure yours is more exciting. At that, he laughed. Okay, fine. We headed south first and stayed along the Windfall. We skirted Oakbridge and lived in Beijing for a while. I thought we'd be able to hide there easily because of all the ships and people in and out all the time, but folks started to get suspicious anyway. For whatever reason, we didn't have that problem in Greensward, despite the heavier presence of soldiers, so we've been there the vast majority of the time. Or, Ben has. I've been in and out, as you know. I felt a little stirring of jealousy. Despite everything, I'd seen little of Tira and nothing of any of our neighboring countries. Someday, I promised myself, maybe I'd have Colin show me around. And presumably, in the fairly near future, I'd finally make it to Oakbridge, although not in the best circumstances. So how did you manage to escape? Captain Beau. Beau, I said. We cured him of that captain nonsense a couple years ago. He raised his eyebrows. Could have fooled me. I still call him that. That's because he gets an ego trip out of it, I said with a laugh. He eyed me. Am I getting the vibe that you're really good friends with the prince? I grinned. You have no idea. His eyes widened. No. 8 months, give or take. My little sister is dating a prince. Trust me, I was as surprised as you to learn he's a prince, I said dryly. God's breath, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. So, I prompted, how did you escape? Forgive me for getting distracted by the idea of you and of Beau. I smirked. I solemnly swear not to interrupt you with declarations of love again. He shot me a look I remembered well from our childhood. I think you missed the point. Escape? Colin flagged down Benton, who trotted up to join us from where he'd been talking to Kira and Bry. Yes? Jasmine wants to know how we escaped Northwind. Thought you might want to help with the backstory. Jez, I corrected. Jez, he repeated yet again, but nodded. I offered my hand around him, though. Not sure last night counts as official introductions or not, but I'm Jez, or Jasmine Lockholme. Ben Walters, he said, taking it in a firm grip. Not Benton? He smiled. I figure I'll get enough of that once I'm officially a duke. Fair enough. So, how did it start? Last I knew, Colin was just a regular old recruit. My brother's grin was somehow half smirk, half nostalgia. He didn't start totally at the bottom, considering your father and his friendship with mine, but he was just a foot soldier in the guard until he got himself noticed. Oh? He was a smartass, Kira said, joining us. That's no surprise. Was to my father, Ben said, laughing. So the three had just taken over and made one sort of test foray in the form of a failed diplomatic reach. Kira had already left for Greensword at that point. My father and I were in the courtyard, reviewing the soldiers, and everyone passed, so we go to leave, and this voice from one of the back rows goes, very clearly, only total idiots would do nothing more to protect themselves than just make sure that their troops look pretty in a courtyard. That's no real way to prepare, Colin repeated, grinning. You didn't. Gods, I wish I had been there, Kira said. He did, Ben said. Our father was livid. He whipped around and bellowed for the coward to show his face. I don't think any of us expected Colin to just calmly elbow his way through and pop out of the ranks and offer us a perfectly normal and respectful salute. Then he goes clear as anything. I did. I glanced at Colin, whose grin had widened. What happened? My father stepped right up so they were nose to nose. Colin didn't flinch. For a couple of minutes, they just stood there, neither even blinking. Then father goes, follow me, and stalks off into the castle. Colin followed, and I followed them, because I honestly thought father was going to tear him to pieces. Or, at the very least, send him home to Lockholme. To my utter shock, my father walked right to my room, pointed at the room next door, which was small and had been unoccupied since I turned 18. Then he goes, you're in charge of Benton's safety. Should you fail, I will hunt you down and kill you, even if it's in the afterlife. Do you understand? Colin picked up. So I said, yes, sir, and the rest is history. Other than the letter I got from Mom and Dad that was equal parts praise and threats of strangulation. Sounds about right, I agreed, suddenly acutely missing the rest of our family for the first time in a long time. I couldn't allow myself to think of it before this, and even now I worked to squelch it. There might be a time, maybe even within the year, that Colin and I could safely see them again, but it wasn't now, even though at some point we'd be close to Lockholme on our way back north. Still, it hadn't answered all my questions, and I'd even come up with a new one. Kira, why did you leave? Oh, it's nothing special. I'd always had a desire to see more of the Northwind, so before the three took over, but after I turned 18, I left. I told them that arranged marriages were not my thing, and they sort of tried, so I left to prove my point, but I knew they wouldn't have pushed it unless I liked the person. Our parents were furious, and I was mad at them too, so I only wrote to Ben, but sent the parents' messages through them. She sighed, some of the amusement sliding off her face. I'd apologize now if I could. Except it turned out to be the right decision. Yes, because you're a paranoid bastard, Kira told my brother, with no hard feelings. Being a paranoid bastard has proven quite successful. Ben rolled his eyes. If I had to guess, I suspected Kira and Colin did this often. Anyway, he interrupted, talking over them before they could descend too far into the bickering. Colin made me burn the letters once the three took over, and immediately burned all successive ones after they did before Northwind fell. So they had no idea where you were, I said with sudden understanding. Exactly, Kira said. I'd already been using a false last name because it was safer when out in the world without protection, and it made it harder for our parents to try and track me. So, once Northwind fell, Kira Walters fully dropped off the map. So what happened the night the three's men overran Northwind? Well, I'd already set up a set of signals, with the help of Beau, for when the attack came. Unfortunately, they didn't work as well as I wanted, Colin said. By the time they struck towards the end of the year, Colin and I were friends, considering he was always following me around like a puppy. I resent that comparison. If Colin was anything like he'd been when we were younger, I thought it apt enough. I like fast friends better. Not too fast, Ben said dryly, but smiled. I was annoyed at first with my father for saddling me with some green minor noble as a bodyguard. I didn't want a bodyguard, period. Colin waved that comment away. Anyway, he continued, looking mildly annoyed at being interrupted, even with the safeguards in place, I only managed to get Ben out because I was awake the evening they attacked. It had been cold for a couple of weeks, and it even snowed heavily a few days before, but I guess they figured it meant our guard would be down. And it was. I saw the torches coming our way and just knew. So I had a bag packed for Ben and a back door. I got to Ben, woke him up, sent him and his bag down to the kitchen where my bag was and the way out. Then I tried to save the Duke and Duchess, but somehow they were already inside and I was cut off at every pass. I knew my first duty was to Ben, so I backtracked and got him out through the kitchens. He shook his head. Should have recruited others, so he could have gotten the Duke and Duchess out, too. Ben squeezed his shoulder. We both know you tried your hardest, Colin. That's all any of us could ask. And if it hadn't been for you, I would have lost my brother, too, Kira added. Still, if I knew what I know now, my brother said, next time I won't have to leave anyone behind. I know, Ben said with a small smile. After that, the conversation moved to lighter topics. We told competing ridiculous stories from our childhoods. Those of us in the know often called the others out in an exaggeration. Finally, well after dark, and in the foothills of the mountains, and probably not too far from Lockholme, we found an empty, dry cave and caught a few hours of sleep before moving on at dawn. With any luck, we'd reach Cavern Hall late that evening, although probably not before news of the Greensward's explosion reached them through courier, through the system Colin had set up, with help from some of us at Cavern Hall. I did grab my brother by himself in the late morning to tell him a much briefer version of the events than I had related to Stella and Dave and Jay in the cell. I hope Mom and Dad and our brothers do know you're all right. He nudged me with his shoulder and offered a familiar crooked grin. Either way, we should be able to set the record straight soon enough. Let them know they haven't lost any kids yet. I smiled. Hopefully. Don't suppose you know how they're doing. The grin widened. What kind of master spy do you take me for? He asked, and launched into a description of recent going-ons in Lockholme. And for a moment, everything since the day I had thrown a book faded, and it was just Colin and I gossiping about the locals. Although I didn't really want that time back, it was nice to retreat there, just for a little while. Sorin rapped on Ren's door, counted to 10, and then pushed it open. Annie cut off her sentence and grinned at him. Morning, sunshine. Good morning, he said easily, settling himself on Ren's sofa. Annie was perched on the edge of the prince's desk. Trust her to find what most people would consider the least comfortable seat in the room. And Ren sat in his chair by the window, half facing Annie. Did something happen? Ren asked astutely. I mentioned we had the prisoners we had in Greensward, right? The freedom fighters? Yes, you and Vlad have both been down there. Why? Last night, shortly after you were married, the pair, along with their cellmates, broke out and escaped the city along with a group of others. Did I ever say who they were? Ren frowned in thought and shook his head. I don't believe so. Why? Have you ever met Denham, Lockholme's youngest, Jasmine? A couple times when she was still pretty young. I mostly ignored all the Lockholme kids, but Kent, and then she was killed. Why? Sorin briefly outlined the saga of Jasmine Lockholme, and then the facts and his suspicions about the previous night's escape. Even as he reported it, he knew that if Vladimir found out, he would go ballistic. All the more reason it wasn't such a bad thing that Vladimir would be out of the castle for a while. Ren wasn't likely to mention it either. If he'd learned one thing from his time as a prisoner, it was discretion. Ren let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned, he said. Do you think I'm right? You knew Benton growing up as well, right? He nodded. Ben and Kira both, and better than Kent. The two spent a couple winters here when we were kids. Kira especially hated the fierceness of Northwind's winters. Ben and I wrote regularly, and he told me Kira had left after a fight with their parents. In a few of the later letters, he said she was fine. Ren paused, studying Sorin. Colin Lockholme was definitely his bodyguard. He told me the whole story after it happened. Ben grew to trust him with his life. I hope you're right. It would be nice to not have lost him. And then it was time to drop the last shock. They also blew up Greensward Palace. They what? Ren burst. You heard me. But why? They're supposed to be helping, not leaving Tira in shambles, he protested. Sorin tried hard to fight an amused smile. I presume it was to cripple our hold on the city. It hit the Balsic stores, too. It was Annie's turn to whistle. Kaboom! Annie! Ren protested. Muffin, she retorted. Obviously, I'm no less displeased, Sorin cut in before they can get into one of those inane arguments they both enjoyed so much. But it is what it is. We'll save what we can. Jakium says there isn't much left, and Colonel Reese is dead. They killed Reese, Annie said, surprised and clearly a little impressed. Yes, Jakium saw the body himself. Good riddance, his sister muttered. Sorin both could and couldn't disagree on that. Annie had never liked Reese's desire and ability to go as far as necessary, even taking joy in it when it involved hurting someone. The two had clashed every time they'd been in the same room. That same trait had made Sorin itchy, too. It was a little too reminiscent of Edward, but at the same time had been much needed in their work. He respected Reese as a good commander of his men and for his sharp mind. Clearly, though, he wasn't supposed to have heard that comment, so he pretended he hadn't. Did I ever tell you we got a name for your brother? No, Ren said cautiously. Bo. At least, I assume he's the leader of the freedom fighters. It was one of the few things Jasmine and James gave up while we had them. Ren nodded slowly, but didn't look surprised. That's what I told my brother. My parents we should name a brother if I ever had a sibling. Guess they took it to heart, he explained at Sorin's look. That was interesting. Sorin wished suddenly that he had known Patrick Highcastle better. You mentioned Jakium. Is he here? Here and sleeping. He rode through the night to be here before dawn. I want to talk to him when he wakes, but I can send him your way after that. Although, there's no rush. He'll be here a while. You're not sending him back to Greensward? No, Greensward is weakened beyond repair. This was the freedom fighters' first big move, and it worked. In one night, they neutralized the second most powerful city in Tira. Ani and Ren shared a glance. Are you saying their next step is here? Ren asked quietly, like he was afraid someone might overhear. Sorin cast a quick look towards the peephole, but doubted Vladimir was nearby. He would be too deeply involved in his preparations to chase the former prisoners. Logic would say so. If they can hit and knock out Greensward out of the fight like it's nothing, I would think it wouldn't be too hard to pull off this winter, but the thaw will come soon enough. God's breath, Ren breathed, looking stunned. Vladimir is leaving today, or perhaps has already left, to try and track down our escapees. I suspect he'll be absent much of the coming weeks. I'd like to take Jakium and make a brief sojourn north at some point when he's around. North? Why? Ani asked, but there was understanding on Ren's face. Maybe they hadn't ruined the prince after all. I'd like to visit Denham and Alicia Lockholme about their children, specifically the two youngest. Can you try and play nice? Ren asked a little dryly. They both believe their children are dead. I will do my best, Sorin promised. I'll let you know before I plan on leaving, he said to Ani. Clearly Vlad doesn't feel the same way, she said lightly, knocking her heel against the desk's leg. Vladimir has a lot in his mind. He didn't really know why he was defending his brother. Habit, perhaps. She nodded, but looked unconvinced. He didn't blame her. Why are you telling me all this? Ren asked finally. Sorin shrugged and stood. I wanted to tell Ani, he said blandly, and she's living with you now. None of them believed that for an instant, but it was what all three would swear to if asked. Still, both Ani and Ren's faces held complete understanding. The freedom fighters were coming for the three, and Vladimir was the only one who wanted to fight anymore. Chapter 36. We might have made it home shortly after dark, but Jay decided our time was better suited to other pursuits, which he proved when a very wet snowball hit the back of my head. I probably should have let it go, but it made me laugh, and that felt so good that I returned the favor. It was not our smartest move ever. Most of us had no extra clothes, but it was also fun, and we hadn't had much of that recently. The fight lasted over an hour, and when we were done, we decided to call it an early night, already shivering. We found a cave with good ventilation and a little roaring fire, all crowding around, shoulder to shoulder. Colin and Jay competed over who could tell the scariest stories, trying to get a rise out of Dave for being scared, and Stella for telling the scary stories in front of Dave. But the boy listened without flinching. When the pair stopped, looking at the 10-year-old in awe, Dave just shrugged. Those are all fake, he announced, and would talk nothing more about it, although we all knew what he meant. Once we were mostly dry, we settled in, sticking close to the fire and each other. In silent accord, we were up early and had breakfast on the march. By mid-morning, we reached the familiar stretch of woods surrounding Cavern Hall. I couldn't help grinning broadly. I missed Bo, but also Duncan, Reardon, our roommate Anne, and a variety of others. Bo's been keeping the door shut, afraid of reprisals from the three, pretty much since you two left, Jessie informed us as we approached what appeared to be a solid rock wall. She picked up a rock that sat nearby and rapped out a very particular sequence. After a moment's wait, the wall swung open, revealing Duncan, whose eyes bugged a bit before beaming. You all made it! Out! When word reached us yesterday, we were all hoping you'd appear soon. I see you brought friends. Welcome! He bowed slightly. Duncan! Bri burst. Are you friends with this crowd now? I thought you were too stiff for that. After all, you never seem to like me much. That's because you have a tendency to be a pompous pain in the ass, Rye said dryly. Shush you, he said easily. Duncan's face strained of color. But Brighton? He stuttered, horrified. Hi, Dunk! How? He's always had a hard head, Jay said, rapping his brother on the skull. Bry glared at him, shoving his hand away. There was a pause. Oh, God's breath, Duncan breathed, recognition settling in. There are 2 of you. I grinned, as did most of the others. We'd had some time to process. Ben looked sympathetic, and he'd only known Jay for a couple of days. But then Bry was weirdly respectful to him, so this new Bry had to be a bit of a surprise. Duncan now looked at us closely. There is one hell of a story here, he said slowly. You must be related to Jez, he said to Colin. Yes, I'm Jez's brother Colin. Nice to meet you. Our friend sighed. This place will never be the same. Come in, come in. Colin looked vaguely affronted. I couldn't help but take it as a compliment as we all crowded into the entranceway, and Duncan set the door back into place behind us. So, Bry said, living up to his name once we were in. Can I? Please? He drew out the last word. In the days walking north, the rest of his memory had slowly returned, helped along by stories the rest of us would start and press him to finish. He was fully back to his old self, and old tricks. It's not very nice, I said slowly. But it'll be hilarious, he replied, as he had the last few times he'd brought it up. It really can't do any harm, Jessie said. We won't leave Bo and Mick hanging for long. I don't want to know, Duncan announced. That way I can plead innocence later. But I do want the story at some point. He still seemed stunned. I couldn't blame him. Oh, fine. Bry beamed and pounced on me, ruffling my hair reverently. You're the best, Jessie. I gave him a shove. Don't make me change my mind. Bry let go, started forward, and then paused. Damn it, someone needs to show me the way. I'd almost forgotten that Bry had never been to the new Cavern Hall. We can do that, Jessie offered. Come on, everyone, she said, and led the way through the halls. As it was mid-morning, they were fairly deserted, but there were the familiar sounds of various groups working all around us. Jessie led us slightly out of the way to avoid the main room. When we reached Bo's office, Rye slid forward and shot us a thumbs up. Just Bo, I think, she mouthed. Bry straightened himself and marched right into the office. Bo Highcastle, how can you work on a day like this? I barely resisted the urge to peek, listening as we heard a scraping, probably a chair, and then a clunk, most likely Bry putting his feet on Bo's desk. But then, you so often were a no-play and all kind of workman. Then silence. I had to admit that being on this end, it was pretty funny, and I bit my fist to keep from laughing. A quick glance told me my mirth was shared by Jessie, Rye, and Jay. The others all looked more mildly amused, probably more from picturing Bry's glee than anything. I didn't realize I was this tired, Bo said finally. Bet you're overdoing it with Jez gone, Bry said sagely. Still, I would think that I would at least rate a, hello, how are you, Brighton old buddy, out of you. I'm cut deep, Bo. Cut deep right here. I could just picture him pointing at the nasty scar. Sorry? I, figured the how are you would be pretty self-explanatory, he said, words still coming slowly. Honestly, Bo, or is it Beauregard? Because that would be awesome. Just Bo, he said faintly. Right, well, honestly, Bo, does this scar look gushy to you? Bry sounded almost offended. Poor Bo never stood a chance. I was amused by his assumption it was a dream. No? Then what's the problem? I feel fit as a fiddle. I could do a jig to prove it. I wanted to peek so badly, but didn't let myself because I knew if I actually saw Bo, I wouldn't be able to hold myself back. Please, don't. I think it's time I woke up, Bo said, more firmly, as if commanding himself. Bo, my friend, you are awake. No, I am not, because you're here, and you died. So I'm not awake, and my subconscious decided that you should, appear for some reason. He sounded a little frantic now. As cool as that would be, I'm not feeling particularly dead. Not that I know what being dead feels like, but I suspect I wouldn't feel so warm and me-like. Silence again. I can prove it if you want. How? Dead dream people can't hurt you, right? Right? Actually, I changed my mind, because a certain someone would then actually at least try and kill me, and I rather like being alive now that I know I wasn't supposed to be. I brought you a present, Bo. Okay? I giggled, trying hard to stifle it. A bunch of presents, actually. Okay, crew, that's your cue. I didn't wait, turning the corner first. Bo's head came up and his eyes popped. Jez, he breathed, freezing. Hi, Bo, I said quietly. We're home. An instant later, Bo was around his desk and hugging me fiercely. I returned it just as tightly, reveling in his familiar feel and scent. Gods, I missed you, I whispered. His response was to shift slightly and capture my lips with his. I had no complaints with that, melting against him. "God damn it, Jez, I thought I'd lost you," he murmured. I pulled back a little, not because I wanted to, because there were explanations to be made and people for him to meet. Not this time. Not ever if I have anything to say about it. He smiled broadly at me. "Good!" I snagged another quick kiss before stepping back entirely, although I took his hand. "Bo, I have some people you need to meet." "Wait!" he gasped suddenly and spun back around. Bry still sat in the chair, feet on Bo's desk. Jay, now perched on the desk beside his feet, and was pestering his older brother. Bo looked back at me and then back at the dolls, physically rubbing his eyes. "How?" "Yes, that's Bry, and yes, he's alive. Long story, we'll get to that. In the meantime," I tugged his hand, dragging his attention back, "there are some other people you should meet." Everyone had crowded in behind me. Dave stood close to Stella's side, eyes wide as he stared at Bo in awe. I started with our former cellmate, and then the Walter siblings. Propriety had Bo stepping forward to shake hands with both, greeting them with respect. Ben just smiled. "I'm just sorry we never came earlier. We thought we could do more good out in the world." "You probably did," I told him. "And Bo, this is Colin the Flesh, also known as Colin, my brother." Bo had already been turning to offer his hand, and he now went still. "Wait, what?" Colin grinned and took his hand anyway and shook it. "Nice to finally meet you face to face, Captain. Seems like you've been taking good care of my little sister for a while now." I ground my heel into Colin's instep. He winced, but didn't look the least bit sorry. "Yes, we have," Bo said slowly. Your God's breath!" He threw up his hands. "Can we start at the beginning, please, before my brain explodes?" Rye went to grab Mick. "We figured it'd be easy to tell the story once," Jessie said. She was trying to keep the dolls separate as well as prevent them from messing up Bo's organizational system. I wasn't sure she was having much luck. "I think we broke your boyfriend," Colin murmured. I dug my heel in harder. This time he danced away, grimacing. "God's damn, I forgot for a minute that you're probably better than me at defending yourself now. Not that you were a slouch before," he added hastily. "It just usually wasn't aimed at me." "You could make sure it's not by not being an idiot," I pointed out mildly. "If your brother is here, does that mean everyone knows who you are?" Bo asked, his brain clearly trying to process what it could. "Yes, even the three. No more incognito for me. Colin's actually just a bonus." "You're welcome," he said. I smirked. He and Ben helped facilitate the escape once we were free of the prison. "Where the hell is Mick?" "Right here. I see everyone is back." I looked up to see Mick standing in the doorway, where I scooted by him to rejoin Jessie. "And then some," Jay said cheerfully. Bry sprung to his feet and held out his arms as if for a hug. "Mick, so good to see you!" I'd seen a fair few expressions on Mick's face, even with him as taciturn as he usually was. The absolute mix of horror and shock, though, was something I doubted I'd ever see again. "Dearest gods above," he breathed. He put a hand on the wall to steady himself. "How?" "Let's all find a place to sit and we'll explain everything," I said, "from our capture to leaving Greensward." It took a couple minutes to get everyone settled. I sat on the desk, legs tangled up with Bo's, who sat in his desk chair. Bry still hadn't moved, and Kira leaned against his chair, sitting on the floor. The others had spread themselves around the room. The remaining actual chair had gone to Mick after he'd been escorted to it. The older man still looked dazed. "Can we start the explanations, please?" "Jamesy, shall we?" I asked. Bo shot me a sharp look at that, but he shouldn't have been surprised. Even if I hadn't figured out who Jay was before seeing him anywhere near Bry, I certainly should have once I did see them together, much like people immediately made the connection between Colin and me. "I believe we shall, Jessie," he said. In the same style as we had in the cell, only a little briefer, details could come later, we outlined our time in the jail, including bonding with Stella and Dave and learning their history, and meeting Sorin Dakamar and Vladimir Oplin. We covered up until discovering Bry, then Jessie and Rye took over and told of their time in Greensward and the serendipitous meeting with Kira and later Bry. Bry and Kira then told the story of his survival. Kira talked about how she'd smuggled him out of the hospital to keep him from going to jail. He explained that they'd moved to Greensward, where she'd taken the inn job, and Bry had taken the jail job to be close to the soldiers and be able to hear gossip to pass on to Colin and Ben. That's when my brother gave a quick outline of his and Ben's escape from Northwind and eventual arrival in Greensward. He did go into a little more outline, almost like reporting to a superior, about his travels and some of his recent findings. Then, Jay and I finished with the story of the escape, the killing of Trigger Reese, and how Jackson McRose had let us out. Bo, having met the lieutenant as well, seemed especially intrigued by this, much as we had been, but said nothing about it. We had to pause a couple of times as word of our arrival spread, and various people stopped in to say hello and see for themselves that we were okay and had brought Brighton Doll back from the dead. Duncan's initial reaction was a pretty common one. Duncan himself came in about halfway through the story and stayed, taking Dave at one point to help him fetch lunch. It was early afternoon by the time all the important information was exchanged. Bo had taken my hand again early in our heavily edited descriptions of our conversations with Reese, and had yet to let go, even while we ate. He let out a low whistle when we were finally finished. "Wow," he breathed. Wow seems like an understatement. None of us had known every fact that had come out in all of that, although most of us hadn't had the shock that Bo and Mick did. "Let me absorb it all, and then I might have something more intelligent to say," he told me defensively. "I'm just glad I'm me," Bryce said with a happy sigh. "In other circumstances, that would make you sound incredibly stupid," Jay said. "Shush, baby brother. I'm not a baby." I could almost hear 6-year-old Jay in that protest. "Oh, God's breath. We're not going to have to deal with rampant sibling rivalries, are we?" Mick said, his first words in a long time. He pointedly looked at all 4 sibling pairs in the room. "Jess and I rarely bickered growing up, and I doubt that'll change now," Colin said. "If we do, we'll be private about it," I agreed. "I only tease because I love," Bryce said, grinning at his brother. Jay stuck his tongue out at him. Stella responded to the negative. Dave still looked too odd to speak. Kira and Ben also promised to behave. Kira added that she would do her best to keep Brian the straight and narrow too. Or, at least as she put it, the semi-crooked and not too wide. We all knew straight and narrow was asking too much of a doll. "If Bri is too much of a jerk, I'll just remind him that he left me behind," Jay said loftily. His brother winced. "Point received loud and clear." "Which reminds me," Bo started. For whatever reason, that was what reminded me. "You announced your high castle to everyone." Bo smiled a little. "Once I knew Rainier was alive, it seemed like the right thing to do. Reardon and Mick are the only 2 still here that knew, but quite a few members of our extended message system," here he nodded at Colin, "are the old guard that left to protect me and my mother over 20 years ago." My brother lit up, nodding. "That makes a lot of sense. I'd always gotten the impression they were real veterans." "It was a shock to get the letter from Rainier." Bo's smile went crooked. "It's the first communication I've ever had with him. I'm glad he's alive, and I'm hopeful we can keep it that way. I have no desire to be king. It'll be hard enough to be a proper prince when the time comes." "At least you're already dating a noble," Jay said cheerily. "And Rainier married the enemy." "Not sure what your point is," Mick returned dryly. "Wait, married? As in, it happened?" I interrupted. Bo nodded. "Of course you wouldn't know. Earlier the night you escaped Greensward. Word reached us at the same time. Rainier and Anika are officially husband and wife." "Something exciting finally happened, and I wasn't there." "Go figure," Colin said. "It's what I get for helping rescue you," he told me. "And I love you for it," I said. It was also a relief to get the letter, because it meant you 2 were alive. McRose told Adam and Ursula, so of course they let us know as soon as they arrived, Bo said. "We hurried Jesse and Rye's departure to make sure you didn't miss out on our chance to spring you." "You make it sound like we're criminals," Jay said sadly. "We were trying to blow stuff up." "We did blow stuff up," he said with relish. "Boom." Stella smacked him in the back of the head. It couldn't have been hard, though, because he just grinned. "Anyway," Bo said loudly, his usual way of trying to bring us back on topic. "I had a feeling that would be much harder in the days to come. I was just going to tell you that when I got interrupted." "That was a hell of a short engagement," I said. "They are clearly worried," Stella said quietly. It was functionally the first thing she'd said since our arrival at Cavern Hall. She seemed more surprised by her words than we did. Jay and I had long since learned not to underestimate Stella's observations, and the rest of the crew were used to people speaking their minds, even if they were new. "What makes you think so?" Bo prompted gently, when she didn't continue right away. She reddened as she realized we were all paying attention. "They're trying to gain legitimacy, right? They waited this long to announce Prince Rainier's alive, then in just a month he's already married? And one of the siblings? Legally, she's now a princess. It means they've dug their claws in more." "I agree," Bo said. "Potentially, that makes our job that much harder." "Or that much easier," Ben pointed out. At Bo's curious look, he explained. "Now we know they are worried. They clearly see you, us, as a threat. And they're being reactive for the first time instead of proactive." "That's true," Colin said thoughtfully. "They haven't always won, but they have been in charge up until now. This won't be obvious to many as reactive, but it was." "Can we spread the word?" My brother nodded. "Absolutely, as soon as we can get messages out." "Great, I think I'm going to like having all these new minds here," Bo said happily. "In the meantime, how about a tour, and then it should be time for dinner. We'll also introduce you around." Everyone chorused their agreements in various ways. "After we eat, we'll sort out places for everyone to sleep. Some of them will be temporary for tonight. Tomorrow, I'd like to meet with you all again so we can figure out where you best fit and fill you in on our plans. It'd be nice to get a formal report from you 2 as well," he said, glancing at Jesse and Rye, "on how things went, other than well." He didn't sound like he expected to actually get it, and I figured his chances were about half and half on that. "Things really went boom," Jay said solemnly. Thank you, Jay, for that eloquent and detailed description of events. He grinned and bowed slightly, even as he stood and offered Stella a hand up. Anytime I can be of service, Bo, just ask. Bo rolled his eyes. Jay, I'd like Anne to check you both out before the end of the night. Anne? Has she finally taken over? I asked. Yes, he said, and explained to the others. Anne is our head medical officer now. It was past time we made an official post. With people in and out on missions, we've had more injuries than we used to. She's also the fourth roommate with Jez, Jesse, and Rye. Does she need any help? I'm no expert, but I've got lots of experience after the Battle of Deepin's Cross, Kira said, and I kept Bry from dying. No small feat, Bry said. I'm sure she could. I'll make sure you meet, Bo said. Okay, before we go any further, Rye said, does anyone have any secrets they want to get off their chests? Secrets? I asked. Kira's a nurse, and then second in line for the most powerful duchy in the country. You're really Jasmine Lockholme. Bry's alive. Jay's Bry's brother. Bo's a high castle. Our Colin's not only your brother, but some sort of spy master. Why, thank you, Colin said, sounding quite flattered. I don't think so, Bo said, after looking around at us. Jessie cleared her throat. I actually come from minor nobility. Merchant nobility? My grandfather got the title after providing timely supplies during the last war with Alia back when he was a fairly young man. My father's still active in the business, so he's an earl too, like Jess's father. She paused again. Except I'm their only child, so technically I'm the heir too. Or, well, if they haven't disowned me for running away, I don't really care. We all stared at her, but Rye most of all. I was kidding! I figured it was time. That explains your clearly first-class education, Bo said finally. I now looked at him in surprise. I had no idea, he said. Just because I know most of the secrets doesn't mean I know all of them. When Jessie told us her family didn't approve, there's plenty of non-noble families like that. I don't actively pry, but being in charge sort of lends itself to knowing things. Anyone else? Jay asked suspiciously. My name's Michael, Mick said mildly, but if anyone ever tries to call me that, including Bo, as he well knows, I will eviscerate them. For a dozen heartbeats, there was utter silence. And then, okay, Mickey, Bry said, and then bolted from the room, cackling. Mick just heaved a sigh. I think it's time for that tour, Bo said, standing. We'll catch up with Bry, since I doubt he went far without knowing his way around. In fact, he said, and counted down from 3 with his fingers. Am I lost? Laughing, I slid off the desk carefully, stiff from the long time with no real motion, and waited for the others to all get up too. I took the time to run my fingers through Bo's hair and kiss him gently. I love you, I said quietly. He smiled that little smile of his. I love you too, he said, and then led the way out for the grand tour of Cavern Hall. It took a week before Sorin could leave Oakbridge for the jaunt up to Lockholme. When he approached Jakium about accompanying him, the young man looked mildly confused, but agreed readily enough. He'd recovered fully from the events in Greensward. Vladimir hadn't. His brother returned midweek, empty-handed and railing against the freedom fighters. To no surprise of Sorin's, or perhaps anyone with an even keel, the escapees had disappeared without a trace. Vladimir didn't seem satisfied with Jackson's version of events either, and questioned the lieutenant 3 more times, but Jackson stuck firmly to his story. Sorin wasn't entirely sure he believed all of it either, but he trusted if Jackson wasn't telling the whole story, he had good reason. He'd known Jackson for a while, and knew the young man thought everything through. Annie also trusted him implicitly, and the list of people she felt that way about was painfully short. It was enough for Sorin, but it was also why he invited the young man along to Lockholme. Sorin hoped that Vladimir would stay put after the fruitless search, but he was gone again immediately. Impatiently, Sorin waited for him to return, only to have Vladimir announce he'd be gone again for a couple of days. At that, Sorin gave up on the hope that one of them would be in the castle. He had to trust that the freedom fighters would not truly be able to mobilize in the winter, even a mild one. So he picked a day and dragged Jackson with him. It would take a full day to get there. Jackson stayed quiet all morning. Sorin half expected to catch him smothering yawns at the early start, but he mostly looked lost in thought. Sorin was okay with that. He had a lot to mull over, including what the best approach might be in Lockholme. Finally, though, after a brief lunch, he broke the silence. Where did you live before Vladimir took over as your guardian? Holly, Mr. Sorin, he said. It was the nearest place with an orphanage, after my parents were killed. Ani and Ren, right? Yeah, which was ironic, considering my parents had both grown up in Alia and moved to Tira about a year after I was born. To his shame, Sorin hadn't known that. Do you ever wonder, what if? Jackson didn't hesitate or ask him what he meant. All the time. More recently, I guess. What with Annie marrying the prince and all. I'm still sorry that Vladimir did not give you a choice. Water long under the bridge. Although, hey, Jasmine didn't die after all, so it wasn't quite as horrible as I thought. Sorin stared at him, smiling despite himself. Jackson often had that effect. His sense of humor was subtle and regularly eclipsed by Annie's more obvious and somewhat overbearing humor. Clearly, he agreed, although it certainly took us long enough to find out. Not as long as it could have been. Jakium also had a sense of optimism that rivaled Annie's, which continually surprised Sorin as well. His own optimism had vanished a long time ago. "Can I ask you something?" Jakium said after a moment. "Of course." "Annie said you think the freedom fighters will attack come spring. What are their choices?" "Do you want an actual number, or is good enough?" "Good is enough," he said, pressing his lips together thoughtfully. Sorin let the silence stretch. Shortly after nightfall, they came upon a wayside inn, and he called a halt. They would get little enough good regard in Lockholme. There was no point in pressing their hospitality by showing up late as well. The next day, they pressed on to Lockholme, getting there by early morning. Lockholme soldiers greeted them respectfully and took their horses as they dismounted. 2 men escorted them inside. "Did you ride ahead of time?" Jakium muttered. "Why?" "They don't seem particularly surprised to see us." "No, I suppose they don't," he agreed as they reached a set of double doors. He paused, grabbing Jackson's arm. "I'm sorry." "What? Why?" the younger man asked as the door swung open. "Oh," he breathed as he understood. "Good morning, Mr. Dacamar." Sorin took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "Good morning, Prince Beau."